Today on Deer Hunt.
Tracks don't lie. If you can get I guess they can lie to somebody that's not accustomed to reading tracks, because if a buck comes to a sliding halt and he really digs in deep or something, but if you get a good true read on a track, to me, that's what I'm really looking for. That
Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 299. Ted Bright, Slinging It. Support for the Big Buck Registry and the Deer Hunt Podcast comes from Mountain Deer Taxidermy. Check out their website, mtn-deer.com, and tune into their new podcast on iTunes called Mountain Deer. And Big Buck merch. You can get cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirts, long-sleeve t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. And show support for this podcast by visiting bigbuckmerch.com. That's bigbuckmerch.com.
Hi, this is Barry Wenzel from Brothers of the Bow and Trophy Whitetail Boot Camps. I'm not really sure what a podcast is, but you're about to push play on what is now my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hi, this is Jared Scheffler from Whitetail Adrenaline. You're listening to my favorite hunting podcast ever, Jay and Dusty on the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast.
This is Rob Richardson from New Hampshire Shadowhunters Club. You're listening to my favorite podcast of all time, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to the show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry. It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we're out of harnesses. We need your help. Anybody that has spare harnesses, please send an email to jay@bigbuckregistry.com. Welcome back to BBR 299. It's been a while since jumping on the mic, and 2020 has been a crazy year. I'm ready to send this year to the archives. Many of you have written in wondering where we've been and why we haven't been putting out any shows. There have been many reasons, but mostly between my day job, coaching baseball all summer, editing and producing the Warden's Watch and Thin Green Line podcasts, there really weren't any hours left in my day to conduct interviews and produce this show. And quite frankly, and I'm sure you'll understand, being outdoor people too, that the last thing that I want to do is spend more hours on a computer. I just want to get outside, just like you. So the plan going forward is to drop roughly one show a month. We'll see how it goes, but as always, it's great to hear from everyone, and we truly appreciate the support. This week's show is an interview with Ted Bright. Ted is, as you might expect, a diehard deer hunter who prefers a mobile hunt over a fixed stand. Ted uses a sling or harness to maneuver from tree to tree based on when and where he's finding active big buck sign. Ted is also an archer and seems to prefer that over anything. Something has clicked for Ted recently, and he says he just seems to be in tune with finding the right hunting opportunity and capitalizing on those more than he's ever done before. We go over Ted's approach, hunts from previous years, shooting from muscle memory, and techniques that he uses to identify a good spot to hunt and how to gain landowner permission. We'll get to our entire interview with Ted Bright in just one moment, but before we do, let's hear from Jim Keller with the Deer News.
5-year deer run of National Deer Alliance and On Watch newsletter comes to an end. This story is from the National Deer Alliance and Quality Deer Management websites. In the September 22nd edition of the National Deer Alliance On Watch newsletter, NDA President and CEO Nick Pinizzotto bids farewell to readers. After 5 years in existence, the National Deer Alliance will be joining forces with the QDMA to form a yet-to-be-named organization. Between now and the end of the year, Nick will be leading a strategic planning process that will announce the direction of the new organization at the end of 2020. This joining of forces is really somewhat of a homecoming since the NDA was formed as a result of the 2014 North American QDMA Deer Summit. As the two organizations developed over the years, they have determined that although there are some very different initiatives pursued by each organization, there is enough overlap that efficiencies can be achieved by joining forces. This timing couldn't be better, said Sam Burgesson, NDA Board Chairman. With the challenges facing deer conservation and the sport of deer hunting today, this merger provides exciting and unique opportunities to bring together our resources and strengthen our ability to carry out our mission. We will all stay tuned and look forward to the future announcements. Great American Outdoors Act signed into law. This story is from the National Deer Alliance website. In August of 2020, President Donald Trump signed the Great American Outdoors Act into law. Earlier this year, President Trump vowed to sign legislation to fully fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund, the LWCF, should Congress get it across his desk. The Senate passed the bill in June and the House of Representatives did the same in July. The National Deer Alliance and its members undoubtedly played an important role in the passage of this historic legislation that fully funds the LWCF and tackles the huge maintenance backlog currently faced on our public lands. Introduced in March by multiple senators from both sides of the aisle, the Great American Outdoors Act will provide full and permanent funding for the LWCF at $900 million annually and address the $19 billion maintenance backlog on our public lands. The LWCF, created in 1965, provides funding for land and water conservation, outdoor recreation, and historic preservation projects. The fund is not tax-funded, rather it's funded by royalties collected from offshore oil and gas operations. The LWCF has provided funding for conservation projects in all 50 states and nearly every county in the United States. The Great American Outdoors Act will ensure that the LWCF will be fully funded at $900 million annually for just the third time in the fund's half-century history. For reference, the fund is slated to receive $495 million this year, the highest allocation in the last 17 years. 2 exotic tick species found in Rhode Island for the first time, officials say. This story is from the Fox News website. 2 exotic tick species have been discovered for the first time in Rhode Island, state officials announced at the end of September. The Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management said both Asian and Eurasian ticks were discovered on Block Island as part of a decade-long study of ticks on the island. It was confirmed by the DNA and morphological characteristics that these are ticks not previously found in Rhode Island, the agency said. The ticks were discovered by Danielle M. Tufts, a former associate research scientist at Columbia University. Tufts identified the tick species as the Asian longhorn tick and the red sheep tick when studying ticks on Block Island this summer. The ticks were originally thought to be native, but on further examination were found to be exotic species. The Asian longhorn tick was first detected in the U.S. in 2017 in New Jersey, but archive samples later determined these ticks may have been in the country since at least 2010. The Asian longhorn tick is considered a serious threat to livestock in Australia and New Zealand, where it is invasive, the agency said Monday. It poses a risk to New England livestock because it can attach itself to various warm-blooded animals to feed. If too many ticks attach to one animal, the loss of blood can kill the animal. In 2018, a study warned the tick could spread to much of the eastern U.S. and parts of the Midwest, as well as a small section of the Pacific Northwest. The red sheep tick is native to the southern half of Europe as well as England and parts of the North African coast. The finding on Block Island is notable because this tick is not known to exist outside of its home range, state officials said. Both types of tick can transmit a variety of diseases to humans and animals. However, only one disease has been found in these ticks in the U.S. Officials recommend following standard guidelines to avoid issues from all species of ticks. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. Special thanks to Tim Donzie, Daniel Applebaum, and John Geis for leads on stories this week. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any idea for future topics or have questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Well, thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here is Ted Bright. Ted Bright, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks, man. It's I'm glad we could put this together. I know we have several mutual friends, and anytime that somebody's profile pic is somebody holding a big buck that they just killed, you capture our attention.
Yeah, and likewise, I've heard the show many times, and I'm honored that you asked me to join. I appreciate it.
Cool, man. So, Ted, you're an interesting guy, and I got to ask right off the bat. And I'm guilty as charged. I've been kind of poking around your social media, trying to understand a little bit more about who you are in preparation for this interview. And I can't help but notice, but you seem to be a Patriots fan. So I got to ask, how did you become a Patriots fan being in Missouri?
Oh, that's great. I am a fan of excellence. So, actually, the very first time I started rooting for the Patriots was when, living in St. Louis, the greatest show on turf, the Rams, were all the rage back in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And I mean, it was, bandwagon wildfire style.
Right.
And so then in 2001, at the end of the 2001 season, when the Patriots played the Rams in the Super Bowl, I had kind of started liking the brand of football that the Patriots were playing. It was just solid fundamentals, good defense, no penalties. And the Rams were the exact opposite of that. And so, I just really embraced the Patriot way. And, when, they won with a 36-second drive by whatever it was by an unknown guy, 199th draft pick out of Michigan, Tom Brady.
Right.
And the rest is history. Like I said, overall, I'm a fan of excellence, but it was just that brand of football that they brought to the table was my style of football.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I mean, you hear so many people that hate the Patriots because of their cheating ways, and I think there's a lot of jealousy that happens when you are so successful for so long. But you're right. You have to admire the excellence. That doesn't come every day. I'm obviously a Patriots fan. I grew up in New England, and I attended that Super Bowl. Actually, it was the first Super Bowl I ever went to, and it was fantastic. I mean, it was just a complete underdog. But I was in the bathroom. It was held in Louisiana. It was during Mardi Gras, and I met some guy from St. Louis, and I was taken back because I'm used to kind of rowdy crowds, New York Jets fans, and I think we're similar to a crowd of people who are Philadelphia fans. But usually I go to the football games, and it's pretty darn rowdy. But I had this guy who was a staunch Rams fan, and he turned to me, he goes, "Man," in a Missouri accent, he says, "You guys got a good team. I think you're going to do all right. Wish you the best of luck." I was like, "What?" Usually we're fisticuffing in the bathroom over in the Jets game, but here this guy is saying, "Hey, good luck." I was like, "Wow, that's class."
Classic Midwestern.
Classic.
But I just don't think it doesn't bode well for football.
No.
It's that is the primary reason why St. Louis is such a great baseball town. I mean, it's the mecca of baseball towns, but
Right.
It just hasn't worked out as far as football goes. And I've got some buddies that if they hear this, they're going to be calling me up, cussing me out. So.
Well, you're right. It's great for a baseball mentality. Keep the calm and strike when necessary. But in football, you need a little more aggression, I think. That's fun. Yeah. So you are in Missouri now. Did you grow up in Missouri?
No, I actually grew up in southeastern Pennsylvania.
Okay.
About an hour and a half west of Philly and 45 minutes north of Baltimore, real close to the Mason-Dixon line.
Gotcha. Also, incredibly good football territory. It's just, that's very cool. So what drew you to hunting as a kid? I assume that you started out as a kid, as a lot of us did, but there's usually a reason or something that kind of triggered that. Do you have a story that led you into a desire to go hunt?
So I just started off, going squirrel hunting with my dad. Back in the day, it was, deer hunting wasn't what it is now. And I think that, in today's society, most people, when they say hunting, they just automatically think of deer hunting. But back then, small game hunting was a lot more popular. And that's how I got started, just doing a lot of rabbit hunting, squirrel hunting, and of course deer hunting also. But there wasn't such a difference between the different types. It's just like everybody just went hunting. And to me, it was never about the kill, or it was never even about the, I guess I can't say it wasn't about the pursuit of the game, but just being out there. I always just had a connection with it. I can remember just going for walks in the woods, and anytime I would get close to deer or, whatever, even like pheasants, I was really enamored with ringneck pheasants when I was a kid. I would just sit back in awe and watch these animals. And, so it started from that. And then it grew to where, I really embraced the challenge, and, especially with archery. So now I've become a huge archer, and I love everything about archery. I'm really delving into, like, currently as we speak in this off season, becoming a better archer and loving the process of archery more. But it all boils down to the love of nature and being out in the wild.
Gotcha. Yeah. And boy, isn't that true? Like, people ask me why I hunt, and people that don't hunt think that it's to kill. And they eventually they'll figure it out. But I don't have a strong desire to kill. I don't dislike taking game, but it's not like that's the drive. The drive is not to get out there and actually kill. It's everything that leads up to that. That is the part that absolutely mesmerizes me. It filters out all the stuff and fills my soul with good things. Makes me feel better about life in a lot of ways. And I'm just in a better mood when I come back home after a good morning hunt or something like that, or any hunt, period.
Yeah, it really does. It makes me feel whole. You said it perfectly. As a kid, I can so vividly recall my first deer that I first killed. I was 16 years old, and my dad was right next to me. It was in 3 feet of snow. Everything about it was memorable. But there's also a time where I was taking a buddy into the woods just to go scouting and exploring, and he wanted to get into hunting, but he didn't have the dad that hunted, and just didn't have the family history of it like we did. And so I took him in the woods, and we had an encounter with a doe and 2 fawns, and it was on a early October morning, and we didn't have no weapons with us or anything. We were just walking in the woods, and we had an encounter, a 10-yard encounter with this doe and 2 fawns. And I can remember everything about that just as detailed as I can my first kill in 3 feet of snow with my dad there. It was one of those moments that just sticks out, and there wasn't even a thought of harvesting the game. It was just, an experience in nature that was profound on me as a kid. To your point.
Right. Gotcha. So you said you're getting into archery more. Does that mean that you were a gun hunter for a long time?
Yeah. I mean, I always, from the time I was 12 years old and I started archery hunting, I always had an affinity for it. At some point as a young adult, it grew to where I enjoyed that more than rifle hunting. But I've never been, really enamored with archery. I've always been, all right, I can hit an 8-inch pie plate at 30 yards consistently, and that's really all I needed. And that really worked well for me. I spent more time on, understanding deer and scouting and, things of that nature versus archery. But now, with some friendships I've developed and everything, that with some guys that are really into archery, it has really piqued my interest, and I've had a different mindset on it, and I really have embraced that challenge. I've totally changed my shooting style, made a tremendous amount of progress from last summer when I saw it and recognized it, and basically throughout the season I didn't really change anything, but I just kind of mentally prepared myself and I learned all about it. And then as soon as the season ended, I began, I basically didn't shoot for quite a while, and I just tore my shot down from the very basics and fundamentals and building up to, a troop back tension style of unanticipated shot release.
Gotcha. Let's break that down a little bit. You sound like JD Martinez fixing his swing. Let's talk about that. So how did you, that's an interesting concept. I mean, I don't hear about a lot of people fixing their archery shot, but boy, there's a lot of fixing to be done from what I can tell. I'm not a great great archer, but I have studied the archery shot quite a bit, and I certainly try to get my fundamentals and techniques sorted out before I go into the season. But I'm interested to hear more about yours and what you discovered. How did you discover that there was something to fix?
Well, I mean, I guess when we boil it down, there's two types of shooting. There's anticipatory shooting and there's unanticipated shooting. And what of course the buzz phrase, target panic. Sorry.
Yep.
Target panic, trigger
Right.
puncher. It's all the same thing, right? So the buzz phrase target panic really is just an anticipated trigger punching style of shot. And so once I learned about this, I thought, you know what, I've never suffered from target panic as I thought, or as most people think of it. But the reality is that anytime you are punching the trigger with the anticipated shot, that essentially is target panic, because you're trying to tell your brain to quickly shoot when the pin touches the target or is close. And that really is kind of by definition target panic. And so I thought, you know what, there's a better way. And I just learned a lot about it. And I made sure that I wanted to go down this rabbit hole because it is a very cumbersome process to actually tear down your shot and start from the very basics. And I'm months in on this, and I've only shot a handful of arrows, but I'm building the foundation through drills and just focusing on proper technique. So yeah, that's kind of that's the why, and that's kind of where I am right now.
Okay, so what is it you're trying to accomplish here, as far as going from target panic mode, as mild as it could be, to what your goal is? What is that goal that you're trying to get to?
Just to become a better archer.
Okay.
I guess I feel like there's it's almost like plausible deniability. So before learning about what target panic was and learning about anticipated versus unanticipated shot, before learning about that, I didn't know. And I for a trigger puncher, I could shoot really well. Especially when I was training, to go out west or whatever, I could shoot a pie plate consistently at 60 yards. But then once I became educated on it, I no longer have plausible deniability. I recognized and I learned that there is a better way. There is, a better archer, that you really owe that to the quarry that you're pursuing. So, I felt like I owed it to the game, and I just went ahead and dove in head first.
Gotcha. So what's different now? Like what's the shot like? Is it, anticipating the shot at this point?
Exactly. It's a back tension style, equal pressure across the back and expanding, instead of just coming to anchor and trying to settle that pin and then bam, shoot it, pulling that trigger as soon as you can. So it's totally different. You just let the pin float, and you're gradually expanding those back muscles until it goes off in an unanticipated fashion.
Gotcha. And when you say you're expanding the back muscles, are you tensing them up, bringing the shoulder blades closer together, or how is that functioning?
Yes, exactly. Bringing your shoulder blades closer together, expanding the chest, and ultimately taking, barely elongating the point from, where the bow rests in the crease of your hand to your back elbow. And that should be a linear form. And, of course, I'm not the expert here. And I suggest, I would definitely recommend that if somebody really wants to get into it, to that level, partner with somebody that knows what they're talking about, because it is a huge rabbit hole. And that's kind of what I saw when I did some cursory investigation on it, is that it's really more complicated than what, I wanted to just delve into on myself. So,
Gotcha.
I have a couple of buddies that are really good archers, and they've been very helpful along the way.
Did you have somebody watch you shoot before, or did you videotape yourself?
Well, that's interesting, because I actually went to, the last couple of seasons, I went to a few quote unquote pro shops and asked about my form. And, I told him, I please tell me, I really want some constructive criticism. Give me some feedback. Oh no, your shot looks great. I wish that the guys that came in here and that would shoot like that. And I don't know what they were looking at, because once I learned and what I know now, looking back, I was cramped up. I shoot a 31.5-inch draw, Jay, and my bow was 30 inches. So, I was literally cramped up.
Wow.
My shoulders were up, my front shoulder was like crooked up, and my elbow was way too crooked, and it just, my form was awful. And numerous pro shops told me that I had good form and everything was good, Well, just because I was, at the shops, you're only shooting at 25 yards. And, just because I was drilling the X at 25 yards, they were probably, all right, well, this guy, he's fine. Let's get him out of there and get on to the next guy or something. I don't know if that's what it was, or if it was just, not knowing themselves. But I asked several people, and then Andy May helped me recognize it. And a good buddy of mine, Josh Trollinger, also helped me to recognize a lot of the things that I was doing wrong. And then, it was in talking with those two specifically, it's like, all right, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be a total reconstruction. So that was actually right before last hunting season. And then, like I said, I went through the entire season with not changing, anything except for a few minor tweaks to make sure that I could still be accurate. And then, I just read a lot. I watched a lot of videos. I really like George Ryle's videos, and just mentally prepared myself for the change after the season.
Gotcha. Okay. So this when did your season end?
January 15th.
Okay. So you've been at this about 5 months now or so, 4 months, thereabouts. And
yes,
in preparation for a summer-long, spring-long prepared time frame, right? You're trying to get in ready shape for the fall, I would assume, so that
yes,
all those bad habits that you have identified previously have been hopefully erased and brought into fruition by the time you can hunt this next season.
Absolutely. And my goal was actually to have that accomplished by the end of May. We're going to go to the Total Archery Challenge event in Seven Springs, Pennsylvania, but it's been canceled. So I don't see any reason why I won't stick to that date, the end of May timeframe on, being, maybe not 100%, dialed in, but I want to be comfortable with my new shot technique and process, and, just have minor tweaks and adjustments throughout the summer.
Gotcha. Very cool. So you've got plenty of time. Do you ever notice, like, and this kind of goes with anything. Let's say you're in a stressful moment trying to accomplish that perfect shot that you've been training so hard for, and for whatever reason you revert back because you've got like this memory that gets drawn out only in a stressful moment. Has any of that happened to you?
No,
not yet.
No. That's it's too early to say,
right,
as far as that goes. But I don't have the personality that's prone to that.
Okay.
I would say, that moment is typically, when the big buck arrives, right? And
exactly.
And, there's varying amounts of time between the time that you see the buck and, you make the shot. But I've always been one to, as soon as I recognize that it's a buck that I want to target and I'm going to shoot, then I focus solely on the vitals when looking at the deer, and everything that I can possibly muster goes towards getting that kill shot.
Yeah.
To the point where it's almost like you become oblivious to the surroundings somewhat. It's
right.
It's a pure focus.
I think John Eberhart talked about that a little bit. Like, he practices and practices and practices, and by the time it's time to, put on that final shot, that real shot, that moment, that kill shot, that he's not thinking about his shot anymore. You're not worried about mechanics. You can't think about that anymore. Like, it should be not something you're thinking about. You don't have time to think about that now. Now you have to just focus on something else. It's a focus, not a thinking. Because if you think, you're probably not going to be able to put that through.
Yeah, and we've all been there. I mean, as a younger adult, I can remember standing in a tree stand and just basically shaking. Right, you can hear the metal rattling.
Heck yeah.
And that's part of the draw. That's part of the allure of it. And overcoming that is it's a rite of passage, right? And the excitement is always there. But when you can channel that excitement to pure focus, and it's like excited focus. Oh, that's what we live for, right? That's the moment of truth. That's what we all are working towards. That's makes it all worth it.
Very much so. So you have followed some people. You mentioned a fellow's name just a second ago that you turned to study the archery shot. Is there anybody else that kind of comes to mind when you decided that you wanted to hone in your skill?
No, I mean, as far as the archery aspect of it goes, those two, Josh Trollinger and Andy May, are definitely the ones that have been the most helpful. And
okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Very cool. So talking about bow hunting more, the shot is something you've been working on. What kind of styles of bow hunting are you getting into? And we can talk about gun hunting too if you're doing that, but it sounds like you're kind of getting into the bow hunting more routinely than anything else. So I'm curious, like, what's your setup? How are you going through? What's your strategy for scouting? Where you stand hunting? Are you a mobile hunter? How does all that work?
Yeah, I'm definitely a mobile hunter, but I can kind of answer the one question pretty quickly, and it'll be a good segue to it. So back in, I want to say probably 2013 or so, I killed a really nice 11-pointer with a gun, and that was I really tried hard to kill him with a bow. And just couldn't get it done. I was so close one night specifically. I think it was Halloween night, but just it ran out of daylight. But anyway, I ended up killing this deer that I had 5 encounters with that year with a gun.
Wow!
And while I was happy and I, enjoyed it, and it was an awesome harvest, I knew I had that feeling in my stomach at that point in time, right there when I am, walking up on the harvest that. That's it's different. Something has changed, and I've not looked back since. I've been all archery. I've only taken the gun out a handful of times, and it's always when I've got one of my kids with me.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the changing point for archery. Now my style of hunting is definitely run and gun. One of the things I like most about the Western hunting culture is the athletic nature of it. There is a breed of athleticism that goes along with hunting out west, and it's one of the reasons why I love going elk hunting. But I try to bring that to my whitetail pursuit. So, just anytime I'm doing anything in the woods, I'm trying to be as athletic as possible, as stealthy as possible. My gear is according to that ethos as well. I'm very streamlined. I take minimal gear, and I just try to be as stealthy as possible.
Gotcha. Okay. Where do you typically hunt in America? Are you a Missouri only guy, or are you a traveler?
So Missouri mainly. I grew up in Pennsylvania and hunted a lot of public ground in Pennsylvania. And then when we moved to Missouri, and the deer in Missouri are totally different than the deer in Pennsylvania, but so I moved there when I was 16, so largely public ground still, and I hunted some. So I kind of hunt, I guess you'd say, east central Missouri, and a lot of public ground. I killed my first deer with a bow on Missouri public ground. I killed my first buck with a bow on Missouri public ground, and then as I got a little bit older, into my mid-20s or so, I just kind of shifted away from hunting public ground. And for whatever reason, I started hunting a lot of private ground that was close by, had, kids and family, and, didn't hunt as much during that time frame because of a lot of that stuff. But always, was always hunting for sure. But I ended up doing most of my hunting on an 800-acre piece of private ground that was 5 minutes from my house. And man, that's where I killed that deer, that last one with the gun. And it just, I guess I got away from what I had hunted as a kid and the style I'd hunted as a kid. And for whatever reason, I got back into hunting public ground, and I've just never looked back. I love hunting large tracts of land where I can play a chess match. If I can find out a buck is there, and I don't really run trail cameras. I do just old school scouting, and if I can locate where a buck is, then I like my odds on large tracts of land where I can play the chess match.
Okay. So let's talk about how you're finding. I mean, the public land is fun. It's nice when you can kill a good buck on public land. There's something kind of pure about that. There's definitely like this argument between private land hunters and public land hunters, and some guys have whole shows about it, and it's definitely kind of cool when you can go in and not only are you outsmarting the deer, but you're outsmarting the hunters because they were hunting the same public land you were, and you got the biggest deer on the land, right? So that kind of means something. But there's also something very special about private land too, and there's a whole technique about getting access to private land. I'm interested to hear about that. How do you go about where you live accessing private pieces of property?
Well, so I just last year, actually, last summer, we moved a little bit closer to St. Louis. So I was faced with this very challenge. Like I said, I love hunting public ground, and that will be my preference, mostly because of, it's large tracts of land. But you have to have some local pieces, right, that you can, before work, get in that hour and a half long hunt or whatever. So the way I approached it last year, and, we moved in early July, and it was, so it's kind of cutting it close, right? I felt like, holy cow, the pressure was on, right?
Yeah, it was.
So
sure.
I built a hunting resume, so I just made a 1-page hunting resume that talked about my experience as a hunter. Some of the things that I've done from, mentoring kids and youth hunting, and, the amount of experience I have, and the fact that I use a tree saddle and I don't leave tree stands behind, or, I just outlined everything that was positive about my hunting experience on a sheet of paper. And I went knocking on door to door around my area, and I was able to gain access to several really nice chunks of land. And the one guy that allowed me to hunt said that when I called him back, he said that in the meantime, 2 other guys had stopped by, and they didn't have a resume. So for whatever reason, that had stuck in his mind, and he did allow me and my son to hunt there. So that seemed to work and, be somewhat effective.
Interesting. So you actually went and wrote out a hunting resume about how you've hunted, where you've hunted, how long you've hunted, almost like you're going in for a job interview.
Exactly.
Wow, that's interesting. And what's your opening line when you walk up to the door, or are you just knocking on doors or getting phone numbers and making a call, or are you actually doing like visiting property?
No, just knocking on the door. I've got Onyx, so I have an idea of what the property owner's name is, but a lot of times, it's listed as something else or whatever anyway. So it doesn't really matter. It's really helpful to, identify a prospect, right? So you're driving along a road and you see this nice field with a, good hardwood stand behind it. But you don't know where the property is. That even worth knocking on their door? Onyx will tell you whether it is or not, right? So, but then once you go to knock on the door, I don't ever have a plan, because who knows? Every scenario is different. Every conversation is different. Right. I just try to, I just be myself. I'm respectful, and, explain to people that, I just moved to the area and looking for some land for my son and I to hunt, and we'll treat it as if it were ours, and it'll be better when we leave than what it was when we came.
That's a great line. I mean, I think when you walk up to a landowner and you say, would it be okay if I could hunt here? It's a lot different than saying, would it be okay if my son and I could hunt here?
Yeah,
right?
I agree. I always say that. I think you're right. It gives an immediate impression of a family man.
Yes, yes, and that you're doing it not only for yourself but for generations below you that are coming up that you believe in. So, yeah, I firmly believe in that too. I've had a lot of success getting access when it's not about when I don't make it about myself and I make it about others. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, definitely.
So, how do you decide that the property is something you want to explore?
Well, if I'm driving by and there's a couple of big bucks out front, that
Kinda
definitely
obvious.
makes it
All
easy.
right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Not that that's always the case, but and when I moved up there, to closer to St. Louis, that it was that time of year, right? So you could drive around, you could see deer in fields, or even one of them was a big cornfield. So obviously you're not going to really see deer in standing corn in July, but you just know that that's a prospect, that's a target, and then again verify it on Onyx, and you just go knock on doors.
Gotcha. I mean, and that makes sense. I mean, you do see deer on certain pieces of property, and that's living under the premise that you have to get permission to hunt on property. That makes sense, right? You need to go knock on doors to go hunt that property. And if you just happen to see a big buck one day when you're driving around and it's on that property, you're jumping on Onyx and find out who owns that property, and next thing you know, you're knocking on doors. That makes
and the adjoining property and the one behind that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're going to surround it and you're going to lock it down. Now, are you finding that you're the only one hunting it at that point, or like you said, there was others had stopped by, but do they choose more than one, or are you typically the only one?
Oh no, definitely not the only one. Usually, these people have other hunters that have hunted there for years, and you better do your best to befriend them as well. And I was able to do that last year also. I just was just out scouting one day. I think it was a lunchtime camera check, and I went to pull a card on a camera. And I know I said earlier I don't really use cameras that much. I think I had 2 of them out last year, and this is one of them. And I went out to check the card on this camera, and as I'm just scouting around the area, I came up on a dead deer, a nice 11-point buck just laying there. It looked like 3.5-year-old 11-pointer. And he had been shot, and you could tell he was shot with an arrow, and he was shot. This was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and I could tell he was shot the night before. And so I contacted the landowner, and she gave me the number of the guy that I had met once just in passing, but I knew that he hunted there. And this made this guy's day, right? He shot this deer with a crossbow right at dusk the night before, and it rained last night, or that night, and he just didn't really have any idea what happened at all, and was just never expecting to find the deer. He didn't even know if he hit it or not. Well, it was a perfect double lung shot.
Wow.
Kind of a shame, but that's the way it goes sometimes. But
right.
He was ecstatic, and he's hunted that place for 20 years or something. So it's always a good thing if you can have people like that on your side.
Definitely. Gotcha. Okay. So there's this other part of you're finding a place to hunt. You've identified there's a buck on the property. You're trying to get access to multiple pieces of land. But because there are other people hunting there, you would obviously bump into other hunters from time to time. But you also have to identify, not that the buck's just on the property, but where to hunt on the property, because the buck's not going to just travel all over the property. It's probably got certain places where it's going to go more routinely. So how does your scouting start after that? You got the property, now what?
Well, I'm definitely going to look to see where, I'm scouting other hunters' sign just as much as I am big buck sign. But, if we're talking private property, then, I'm going to look to see if there is any big buck sign. If there's not any big buck sign, then I'm just really going to write it off until a different phase of the season, and it's early season. Then I'm just going to write it off until some pre-rut action starts to kick up, and then I might scout it again. But that's what I always do is I look for big buck sign. If I can't find any big buck sign, then I'm looking somewhere else.
Okay. All right. So let's break that down a little bit. What specifically are you looking for? What is big buck sign to you?
I mean, tracks primarily.
Okay.
Rubs are helpful, but not always definitive. The height of the rub is going to definitely tell you something, and the size of the tree it's on. Obviously a dinky little 6-pointer is not going to rub a big cedar tree, but tracks don't lie. If you can get I guess they can lie to somebody that's not accustomed to reading tracks, because if a buck comes to a sliding halt and he really digs in deep or something, but if you get a good true read on a track, to me that's what I'm really looking for. That.
Gotcha. All right, so you're a track guy. Now I can relate to that, because that's the one thing I'm always looking for. Is not so much. I mean, I look for sign, but then within the sign, if I get a heavy amount of sign, I'm looking within that sign for the big track. If I don't have both, then not as apt to be in that area.
But and I really need to kick up my trail cam game. Just have never really used them all that much. I had a few here and there, and last year I ran one behind the house and then one on that other property. But I need to kick up my game a notch on that. It's a great tool, and it's foolish of me not to use it, and I really need to get better at it.
You say that, but I have had and witnessed that sometimes you get false reads. Like you get false negatives, I think is probably the most common one. You get a positive is a positive for sure. There's no such thing as a false positive. You're not going to mistake a deer as a big guy. Usually on a camera, you can usually tell. But the false negatives, those are the ones that bug me about game cameras. I love game cameras. Don't get me wrong. I've certainly a huge aid, and you don't have to, especially with the cell stuff. You don't even have to be in there, which is just mind blowing. But what I found is the false negatives, where you may have a camera in there, you're not getting any pictures, and you just assume that there's no buck in there. Well, I've seen it where there's a monster buck in there because I saw the buck, but it didn't go anywhere near the camera. All the little bucks and all the does were frequenting the camera, but the big buck knew better. So it's an interesting, sometimes you just don't get what you're looking for there. But yes, I agree with you. I think cameras can be a huge aid, especially when you look at the positives, not the negatives. Yeah,
especially if you there's a big buck there.
Yes,
and then the intel you garner from a strategic placement, probably close to bedding and letting it soak. I think you can definitely get some good intel that way.
Right, and but that can't be your only intel. Does that do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I absolutely love being able to read sign. I think that I'll never be one of these guys that relies on cameras. While I think that it would help improve my game, absolutely. I enjoy reading sign. I like that challenge. To me, it's the ultimate being at one with nature. When you can read sign and actually determine things from it, not just look at a track and see a track, understanding the why. Why was that deer there? How old is that track? Where was he going? Where was his bed? Where was he going? And, how it relates to other deer movement in the area. That's a skill that I think is probably not as, I don't know. I guess it's just tough for a lot of people.
Yep. Gotcha. All right. So you've got the property. You've identified where the buck is. You said you're more of a run and gun kind of guy. You found a property in the spot where you want to set up. What's your setup?
So I hunt out of a saddle, and I use the climbing system I used the last 2 years was a Cranford strap-on step with a CMI Etrier.
Okay.
So like a rock climbing steps, which are great. It's public land friendly. I can zip up a tree in 10 minutes and be set up and ready to go. It's minimalist, and I really like that style. I am going to be playing with a couple other methods to this all season, and not sure what I'll be settled on by season opener. But so that's what I use. The CMI Etriers on a Cranford strap on, and I use a tethered Phantom saddle. And I like my Badlands Dash pack. I really like that pack.
Yep.
To me, the pack is the piece of gear. I mean, outside of a saddle, because you can wear your saddle in. But so with the saddle and the pack, to me, that's the two most impactful pieces of gear that will make you streamline and, stealthy and athletic.
Yep. Because
the Badlands Dash pack, it's not a short pack. So I'm a taller guy, so I got a longer torso, so it conforms to my body, and I can cinch it down to where you don't even hardly know it's on your back. And to me, that's where the biggest improvement on most hunters being more athletic and stealthy would be is the pack and what they're carrying on their back. Yeah. And, going through brush and everything, I think it's really important.
I agree with that. I have spent money on good packs, and I have gone cheap. And after I spent some better money on more expensive packs, I will never buy a cheap pack unless it's like just, you know what I mean? I'll go into the woods if I'm just scouting. I just, a couple things, but it's actually the hunt. I am not taking a cheap pack into the woods. It does matter.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Yep. So speaking of packs, what do you bring in to the woods? What do you pack your pack with?
So I wear my saddle in, so I don't have to pack anything as far as that goes.
Okay.
Obviously I've got my Cranford studs. I carry 4 of them, and they ball up to be about the size of a softball. So I carry 4 of them. And then of course I've got my Predator platform. And that just straps right through the horizontal lash straps on the back of my pack. So, it just fits nicely on there. And then I carry binoculars always. I don't ever go into the woods without binos, grunt tube, of course, and camera equipment. So I've got a base, arm, and camera. And then outside of course, I'm going to have my bow and my release. And outside of that, I may have a few other things for backup, some Versa straps, just for anything that any use or need that may come about. And outside of that, that's pretty much it. I'm pretty minimalist.
Okay. Are you a hunting in the morning kind of guy, or just evenings kind of guy? What time frame are we looking at?
Oh, I like both. I mean, preferably I would just hunt all day, right. But I like early morning and evening just the same. Okay. I've killed more bucks in the morning than I have in the evening, and I've killed a lot of bucks in that midday time frame, of course, in November.
Gotcha. It's interesting. I usually get the answer. I only hunt evenings, especially in October, because I don't want to scare the deer out of the fields. And I buy that to an extent, but I mean I've killed bucks in the morning too. So I'm not all in on that theory, but I'm glad to hear that you like both. I think that's a good answer. So you're a saddle guy. And that's kind of that's more or less a new craze, I would say. It's become more popular lately. It's been around for a long time, predating even when the use, being used for hunting. It was used for other things before that. Most likely trimming trees. The guys that make their living hanging out of a tree to cut limbs and so forth. What got you into the saddle hunting aspect of hunting?
Well, I was just talking to an old buddy, bow hunter friend of mine, and he was telling me about the way he hunted, and it took me a while to understand the concept. He's hanging in this tree and he's strapped in, and it seemed kind of extreme. It seemed kind of cool. I didn't really even grasp all the benefits at the time, and he let me borrow it, and it was this old trophy line tree saddle. It was leather. So,
wow.
I mean, I opened this tote up and it smelled like a horse saddle,
Yeah.
and it basically felt like it too. It was big and bulky, and to be honest with you, I couldn't even figure it out. Because there was just so much going on with it. If you fast forward and you look at a saddle today, you could figure it out, right? You can see what you're trying to do, and pretty much anybody could figure it out. But those older saddles, I mean, there was just so much going on with them. I tried climbing the tree, and it just didn't work. I couldn't do it, but I still saw the value in it. I thought there's a better way. I liken sitting in a tree stand to sitting on the bleachers at your kid's football or baseball game. It's uncomfortable. It hurts. Shooting is outside of, like a 90-degree range. Shooting is downright difficult and unnatural for the way your body moves. And so I kind of saw this, and I started, again, just reading about it, learning about it. And I knew that this was definitely a better way. And my first few saddles were a better way, but at the same time, still very busy and bulky. And then I finally got a saddle that's like, all right, this is amazing. And here's the difference. And it is a night and day difference. It's so much more comfortable. It's so much more exciting. I guess it's just more fun. And at the end of the day, you can just maneuver a lot better in the tree, and you can shoot a lot better. You're shooting in natural positions that your body's muscular system it's built for that. Yeah. Versus a tree stand where you're standing on a flat object trying to shoot at a downward angle, and you just I don't know. It's just such a night and day difference. I'll never go back to hunting in a tree stand. I feel like it's just I'm past that.
Yeah, I feel the same way. We did that interview with Tethered a while back, and have since acquired a Tethered, and it is a game changer. And I feel like I've got so much more freedom up there. I'm not like you described. It's like sitting in a tree stand. It's like sitting on a bleachers watching a game. To me, it's like watching a game in a crammed stadium. Like you can't really move left or right too much. You can't really stretch out because you're going to bump the person, and the seats in front of you are too tight. So you can kind of stretch out a little bit, but you really, you can't move. Whereas with any kind of harness, you can get behind the tree. You can stretch out. I feel like I've done a yoga workout by the time I've done a hunt, and it's not intense. Like I just feel loose and stretched, and it's weird. It's like you've hung upside down for a while and just acquainted yourself with gravity in a different way.
Yeah. It's almost like, you have to sit so still in a tree stand, and you just don't really have any freedom of movement at all. But in a saddle, I feel like I'm almost constantly, slowly and steadily moving, right?
Yes. It's
almost like you're just constantly moving ever so slightly, while scanning the woods, and being in tune with everything, but you don't really get that, gosh, I'm so sick of sitting here,
Right. You never do. And the other thing I think is unique about it is that you are moving constantly. However, there's nothing quick about your movement. It's all slow and subtle. Like it's just so gradual that you wouldn't even identify it if you were a game animal on the ground. You wouldn't necessarily pick up a movement of a saddle hunter. It's not like you're moving quick, or you got a quick movement for whatever reason.
Yeah. And you've got so many different combinations of movement versus standing or sitting or standing.
Right. Yeah. No, it's been a phenomenal way to hunt. I'm getting ready to sell all my tree stands because I don't need them anymore.
Awesome.
Yep.
You've seen the light.
I have very much seen the light. It's a beautiful light. I wish more people would get into it. So let's talk a little bit about turkey hunting. I know this is the deer hunting podcast, but I promised you a little turkey hunt talk. You seem to be quite the turkey hunter. I enjoy turkey hunting very much. We're in the middle of our season, and I know you've had some success lately.
Yeah, we had a great season. So growing up, there really wasn't turkeys around in that area. Close to York, Pennsylvania. I don't know. Maybe there's some in nearby areas, but I don't ever remember seeing a turkey around the area where I lived. Now I know they were in the mountains and all, but so long story short, I didn't start turkey hunting until I was about 33 years old. And I may have gone out with a buddy a time or two here and there, just messing around. I wouldn't even call it turkey hunting. But finally, my 10-year-old son just at the time begged me to go turkey hunting. So we went, and in typical fashion, I think 6 miles later and 11 o'clock in the morning, we're back at the truck and we heard one gobble. Yeah. And so, like an hour later, after basically tracking these birds down, he was able to shoot a gobbler, and it was like I think it was like a 20-pound gobbler with an 11-inch beard. He's a really nice gobbler. And needless to say, I was very excited, and it was fun and everything. And that was during the youth season. And then the very next time I was able to go out, it wasn't the season opener because it wasn't really a priority for me at the time. But the very next time I was able to go out, I killed I don't know, like an 11-inch beard, and I think he was like 21.5 pounds or something. And it was a tough, like close quarters, stalk style of hunt. And I think I broke one of the bones in my hand chasing him down because it was like a 50-yard shot, and I chased him down and had to, skirmish with him at the end, but came out of the woods victor. And I've been hooked ever since, but even at that, it was still kind of gradual. In the last few years, I've just been pretty well eaten up with it. And it, kind of culminated in this year, went out of state. TJ and I went to Tennessee, and I killed 2 birds in Tennessee. And then the Missouri season came around, and my son and I, TJ, we doubled up on opening day. We both killed our biggest gobblers ever. I killed a 25-pounder, and I stalked him Indian style. He didn't even know I was there. Nice. And then, yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then after I cut him up and got him on ice, TJ and I we did a long flanking maneuver on an area where I knew there were turkeys. I didn't know there was specifically one there, but I knew there was a good turkey area. And sure enough, about 12:20, TJ shot his biggest turkey ever and his first public land gobbler. So doubling up on opening day was really cool. And anytime your 17-year-old son tells you like 30 times, man, that was so fun, I love doing that, that's a victory, right?
It's the victory of all victories in my mind. I think there's nothing better than having a kid saying that was awesome. That's fantastic. So let's talk about a deer hunting story. I asked you about a memorable deer hunt that you've been on that meant something to you, deeply rooted, and I was wondering if you'd take us back on that hunt again.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this one was with my son, and there's probably a few of your listeners that have heard it before, the story on other podcasts and such, but definitely the most memorable would be, and not because it's the biggest buck I've ever harvested, but just the whole thing about it, so my son and I, it was the second weekend of the Missouri firearms season. And, we, the first weekend, I'm sure he hunted with a gun and I hunted with a bow somewhere. I don't remember exactly on that detail, but this was, this is 2017. And the second weekend we went to an archery only public ground, and we mountain biked in and we camped out 2 nights. And, so, after biking in, getting camp set up and everything, and again, this is an archery only ground, so we're both bow hunting. Yep. First night in, I rattled in a really nice 8-pointer, 3.5-year-old, and I hadn't had an opportunity at a mature buck in prior to that in the season, and I tried shooting him at 22 yards, and my expandable broadhead did what they call it walked on the steep quartering away shot and created nothing but a flesh wound, even though I hit exactly where I was aiming. So the range of emotions of a bow hunter, right? Yeah. So I go back to camp, and I'm a little frustrated, of course, and so we have dinner, can't do the whole camp thing, and get to bed, and I went back to that same area the next morning, and I had to get up at like 4:30, which is early when you're camping right there amongst it all, and had to cross the river. So I just, I don't find it worth it to carry waders and all that crap on a minimalist camping trip. So I just stripped down and crossed the river, and then, dressed again on the other side, and
Sure.
Get back in there. And, there was a spike buck that he ran off, he just came out of nowhere and he ran off. And he acted like he had seen a ghost or something, seen the devil. I'm like, all right, something's going on here, and sure enough, about 5 minutes later, I heard something over my right shoulder. I looked and I could see 2 does coming, and then behind them was nothing but antlers. It looked like the tail wagging the dog, right? The antlers were leading the buck through the woods. They were that big in my mind. And so he came by at 25 yards from behind me to in front of me on my right side, and didn't have an opportunity to shot or anything. And he was on those does, and they were not stopping. And I grunted, and every time I would grunt, he would flick his tail. So I could tell it was resonating with him. He was, recognizing the fact that there was another buck in the area, but it wasn't worth dropping pursuit of the does.
Yeah.
And as soon as he went out of sight, I rattled the antlers that I had, the black rack that I carry with me. That's another thing I carry. I forgot to mention that earlier.
Yeah. Right.
So I rattled the black rack, and I couldn't hardly get them set back up, and he came charging back in. He was, pissed, charging in, and he just came almost right to the base of my tree, and he stopped at 10 yards, and I can hear him. It was aggressive,
Wow.
and intense, and I could see the steam coming out of his mouth, and his drool was dripping, and I'm looking over my right shoulder, and I have my bow, and I'm looking at him at 10 yards, and I can't do anything because I still would have to cross all the way over my bridge and everything, because he ran in that fast. And but he's so charged up that I think I can get away with it. So I take my grunt tube, and I'm like 30 feet in the air, just the way it's set up in this tree. Mm-hmm. So I took my grunt tube, and I grunted over my left shoulder. And as soon as I grunted, he just didn't even hesitate. He just started going to his left. And so as soon as he went behind me, he went behind a big tree, and in one fluid motion, I just I lowered my left foot off of the ring of steps I was hunting out of at the time, and dropped down and came into full draw, and I just smoked him on the trot at, he's basically right underneath me, like 7 yards, passed through shot, and he ran off, and I climbed down, and I saw some I knew it was a good shot, and I knew the deer was dead, but I saw some guts at the where he was, and I think that I just caught some guts on the front end of his stomach. And so I just decided, all right, I'm going to just go all the way around to go back to camp and get TJ, and we'll come back and track him and, wait a couple hours, this and that. Well, on my way back to camp, I happened to look over, and about 200 yards to my left, I see this little tiny gray spot that I think is worth investigating more. And after 30 minutes of like creeping up and checking it and everything, I figured out that it's this buck, and I walked up on him, and it's the biggest buck I've ever killed. And, of course, it was even more meaningful being on a camping trip in an archery only area with my son, who was 15 at the time. And being able to share that moment with him was awesome.
That's great. What a great story. Very cool. So a quick question about that. Do you usually hunt 30 feet up?
It depends. You hear this question all the time online, and it's totally situationally dependent, in my opinion. I go into every sit without a premise of how high I'm going to sit, right? Because that can definitely work against you. So if I had to, kind of assign ranges or rules of thumb, then I would say typically in the early season, when the foliage is still strong, then I'm going to be in that 15 to 20 feet range typically.
Okay.
And then it just, on average, it gets higher and higher throughout the season as the foliage drops. But again, there's times late season where I'm going to be 12 feet off the ground, It's just totally dependent on what's going to be the most concealed and stealthy position to get the kill shot.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That makes sense. And how many feet you usually get per Cranford step?
4 of the Cranfords with the CMI Etriers will get me to about 28 feet if I max them out.
Okay. Gotcha. Very cool. All right. I've got 10 rapid fire questions for you if you're ready.
All right. Ready.
What's your number one hunting tip of all time?
Read the woods. Become one with the woods.
Nice. Sometimes we leave something in the car or the truck or at the house that we wish we had with us, and it drives us crazy if we don't have it with us. What's that one thing for you?
It drives me crazy if I don't have my binos. Got to have my binos.
Binos, yep. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
Just do it. Quit crying about it and just do it.
I like that. What would you tell? How old are you today?
I am 42.
42. What would you tell the 24-year-old Ted Bright, knowing what you know today about life?
Follow your dream. Go hunt. Go hunt and fish.
I like it. You're at a hunting convention somewhere in the world, and a stranger comes up to you and they ask you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
In sales, and I love to hunt.
Nice. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had a sausage, egg, and cheese breakfast sandwich. That is homemade, of course.
Homemade. Gotcha. You get your own billboard on the side of a highway. It's a blank canvas. You can put anything you want on it. What would it say?
Just do it. Quit crying.
All right. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops in your head and why?
Ted Bright, because I'm happy with where I am. I think that, all too often in life, people are that resentful or, wish they would have done this or that, be happy with where you are and do your thing. Do you.
I love it. What's a typical day in your life look like?
Typical day is I get up at 5 o'clock, some sort of exercise if I'm not going hunting or fishing, and then, work. I work from home, and unless I'm traveling, and then, family activities in the evening.
Very nice. And then what's a typical deer hunting day in your life look like?
Best scenario, I'm camping somewhere. I love camping and waking up and hunting all day.
Nice. That's awesome. Very cool. All right. Those are the 10 rapid fire questions, man. So if we have created some more questions than answers, or people want to reach out to you after they listen to this show, how do they reach you, Ted?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, very active on Facebook, on a lot of the hunting forums, just Ted Bright on Facebook, and on Instagram, it's Teddy Bright 21. And my YouTube channel is Hunt Fit Ted. I've been really making a better effort here recently to put out a lot of videos. I do a lot on hunting. I do a lot on wild game cooking for the average person. And, I'll be posting a video of my son and I catching a couple of really nice redfish yesterday. That'll be coming up soon. And just any type of outdoor adventure stuff. I don't stick to just hunting. But yeah, Hunt Fit Ted. Please like, share, and subscribe.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you coming on the show. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure to have you on, and I'm glad we put it together. Learned a lot about how you came about your styles of hunting, and love to hear that you're a saddle hunter like myself now, and that we both seen the light. And I'm looking forward to checking out more of your stuff on YouTube and Instagram.
Sounds great, Jay. I'm a big fan of the show, and I appreciate you having me on.
Well, gang, that's a wrap. Thanks to Ted Bright for joining us on the show and sharing his insights about hunting from a sling and what he looks for in a good buck spot. I know we've been gone since April, but it's always good to be back on the mic. And as I mentioned in the opening segment, as of right now, the plan is to drop one show a month. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again right here on Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunt Podcast.